This time, learn about the secrets of the color disc. The color disc is different than all the other color options in Procreate, and this is very intentional. The rest are for graphic designers, but the disc is for artists. Let me show you why and teach you a bit of color theory. On the color wheels I've been using, certain colors are on opposite sides of each other. For example, red and cyan match up. We call them complements. If you think for a moment, it makes sense. Cyan is the color with every color but red, and red has none of the colors of cyan. We can assign compass points to this, and we can see that red is at 0. On a hue slider in Procreate, we can see red is 0 and also 360 degrees. Cyan is 180 right in the middle, exactly halfway around the circle, which is what we would expect. But if we go to the disc palette, cyan and red are not across from each other, though I said they should be. The mystery behind this is a good thing for traditional artists. Except for the last 150 years or so, the color people saw was reflective color. Light would bounce off an object, and some wavelengths would be absorbed and others would reflect. This tree absorbs all but the green light of the spectrum in the leaves. Paint does the same. A chemical pigment gives each paint a different color. Until color television, there were very few sources of light that we would call transmissible. Before the invention of the arc light, there was fire, lightning, glowing metal, and of course, the sun. Light could have filters put in front of them to make transmissible colors, and stained glass windows are a great example of this. But the multicolor LED changed that. Most of the devices we use today transmit light, and there's a critical difference between transmitted light and reflected light. Let's see this difference in Procreate. So if I go to the values, I can see what happens with transmitted light. If I slide all of the values here to 255, I get white. As you add colors together, they get brighter and tend towards white. This is transmitted color. On the other hand, let's put some splotches on here. So I'm going to pick a red one and just throw a red circle on there. And then I'm going to do a green one. And then I'm going to do a blue one. If I take the blend tool and mix all that up together, you'll see I get a kind of dull looking color here in the middle. This is subtractive color and happens with reflective color because pigments mix together, reflecting light differently. With more colors involved, less color reflects. Procreate and some other art applications use blend functions which simulate how pigments in reflective color work. When you're using pigments, green has problems as a primary color. And for centuries, instead of green, artists used yellow as a primary color. Instead of RGB, we have an RYB color wheel. RGB works extremely well in solid color on displays, such as this piece I did. But if you're using art materials, RYB is your best friend. There's one more place that you can see transmitted color I didn't mention yet, the rainbow. And since we didn't have transmitted colors back when we first saw rainbows, we get Roy G. Biv, the RYB color wheel, to describe the rainbow. The color disc is an RYB color wheel for artists' use. Even if you're colorblind like me, the harmony of colors here works if you put the disc hue in the right place. Complements always work well together. Pick any color. That color will look good next to its complement on the opposite side of the color wheel. If you need a color to darken either one, mixing always gives you that color. Sometimes mixing doesn't give you enough color, and mixing always muddies it. And that's what the middle part is for. You have two dimensions, saturation and brightness. Saturation is a proportion of hue and white. Full saturation is full color. Low saturation is pure white. If you open the color palette and look where the selector in the middle is, I'm going to select magenta here. And I'm going to shift that circle to the right here in the center. And you can see that it's getting grayer and lighter as I do that. Going up and down is the brightness of a color. You could think of this as the proportion of black to your color. You have a lot of color at the top and a lot of black at the bottom. So go ahead and select magenta again, and you'll see that a pure color is somewhere at the edge around 2 o'clock. Instead of what we've been doing with opacity or mixing colors, you can use saturation and brightness to blend colors. So let me show you a quick example of a yellow ball. So I'm going to select yellow here, and let's get a new layer. And I'm going to draw the circle in pure yellow to start. So I got a big yellow circle there. And then for light areas, I'll use a high saturation, high brightness. So over here somewhere. And we can get a white. I'm going to get a little bit more of a palish yellow here. And I can put that over here. Then I might go over a bit to like over here, where I still got a very good high saturation, but a little lower brightness. And I can stick some more color in there. And then usually I go about right there is another good color. And that's going to start being my shadow colors. And then I got two choices here. Is then I then go to a dark. Now I could use the dark yellow here, but this is another place where a complement usually works very well and will give you even darker color. So I'm going to go the complement of the yellow down here and stick a little bit of color in there. And even with that, you can start to see that we've got some nice colors. We don't even have to blend. But let's just do a little bit of blending here. And you can see that our ball comes together very nicely, pretty darn quickly, particularly in a pastel like this. Now, I tend to use colors that fall in these same ranges, but you can pick what other colors work best for your mood and style. I'll pick a color over here with a low saturation and high brightness, a medium color of a mid saturation and high brightness, a darker color for darker areas, and then a complement for a dark shadow. Now, the RYB wheel does change a few colors around from our basic colors in our palette. You might want to use those RYB colors quickly in your own palette. So let's learn how to modify palettes as well while making this new RYB palette. And so I'm going to go ahead here and start over here at palettes. And I'm going to take my basic colors palette. I'm just going to duplicate that. And now I have a second one here. And now I'm going to rename this basic colors on top here by tapping on the word basic colors. And I'm going to change that to RYB basic. So first thing we're going to do is cyan disappears and it gets replaced with green. I'm going to go over here to disk again so we can see the disk as we're doing this. But the way you can do this is I'm first going to just take my finger and hold down on a color. And if you hold down long enough, you'll get a little message that says delete swatch or set current color. So one way to do this is if you just click it once and then go over to cyan and hold it down and set current color. Now I've changed it to green. You can also drag them, by the way. So I can drag the color over like this if I want to move its position. So those are two things you can do to modify colors in their positions. And now I'm going to move the yellow the same way. I'm just going to move it over here. And now I'm going to be able to replace this other color here that was cyan. I'm going to replace that with orange. So I'm going to go over here to value. I can actually type in a hexadecimal value for this one. So I'm going to go over here. And that happens to be FF8000. Hit done. And you'll see up on the RGB, that's 255-1280. Okay. And now I can just do that replace thing, where if I hold it down and set current color for all three of these, I've now made that the orange that I need. So now I've got red, orange, yellow, green. And I'm going to be replacing magenta as well. And magenta gets replaced with 8000 FF on the hexadecimal, which is the fast way of doing 128.0255 up top if you wanted to type it that way as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and replace the magenta. So again, I'm just going to hold down my finger, set current color. Now, if you want to get really interesting, and sometimes you may want to just get rid of a color, you can also delete the swatch, okay? And anywhere where you've deleted a swatch, wherever you tap it, it comes right back in as well. All right, and so now you've got yourself an RYB palette as well to use the RYB colors, which I tend to use an RYB palette more than I use the RGB palette, if I use a palette at all. Now, your challenge for this week is to do something colorful, now that you have all this wonderful stuff. We haven't done any landscapes, and a good one to try with what you've learned on the color wheel is a sunrise or sunset. You'll find this one in the assets on the webpage. If this one gives you trouble, don't worry. Next week, we're going to make a sunset and apply this theory so you get a better idea how to use all this color. So make sure to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next exciting lesson.